Well, this week we are going to do probably my favorite argument. Actually, not probably. It is my favorite. I'm not going to lie. And I actually was super nervous about it because I don't know if for some reason when I get excited about something, there's just like all this stuff. You're like, Rob, why is like basketball your favorite sport? I'm like, oh, because of and I get so excited I don't even know where to start. So it's the same problem. Like, I'm really nervous. I'm just gonna like word vomit everywhere, and it won't make any sense. So hopefully not. Just try and track with me. But this is my favorite argument. I think it helps answer probably the toughest, most frequently asked question to Christianity, and also this tends to be the one where when I'm at my darkest, my worst, where I've been going, okay, I can't believe this anymore. I think I need to walk away. I don't know if I can, have faith. I don't know if I can do this Christian thing. This tends to be the one that's just like the lasso in God's hand, where He's just like, nope, and just kind of drags me back. And that's one of the reasons it's my favorite. The morality argument answers the biggest question, which is the one I keep kind of talking about. It's if God's so good, then why is there evil? And we'll narrow that down. But if you go, Rob, what's the morality argument? What is it in a nutshell? What's like the one sentence synopsis? How would you sum it up in one sentence? It's really easy. It's actually just this. If morals exist, then God exists. So if morals exist, then God exists. Now, that doesn't seem very flashy. It's not like, oh, wow, great argument. That sounds amazing. Yeah. On the surface level, there's not a whole lot, but if you dig a little bit, it actually makes a lot of sense, and I think it's actually very, very powerful. If you remember when we talked about worldviews 2 weeks ago, the four big questions we have: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. So each worldview answers those four big base questions about life. And when it comes to naturalism, when it comes to atheism, we're pretty lenient, pretty okay with going, okay, origin, we got here by time plus chance plus matter. So it was just a big chance. There's this explosion. This matter was eternally existent, it happened to be there. And then over millions and millions of years, here's life as we know it. We're okay with that. Usually where atheism breaks down is in meaning and morality. Because remember, logically, if all we have is time plus chance plus matter, it's just this random system, this random course of events that brought everything that we know, life as we know it, then there really is no meaning to life. And sometimes they said, okay, maybe survival, we'll talk about that. But then we get into morality, and you're going, okay, well, how do I know what good is, what is evil? And that's what morality is. If you don't know, morality is just ethics is kind of another word you hear thrown around, or it's just how do we know what is right and what is wrong? What are the right actions to take and what actions are wrong? That's all morality is. Usually if you push in on those 2 points, meaning and morality, when it comes to a naturalistic worldview, something breaks. Because at the end of the day, they're going to want some meaning pulled in from somewhere, or they'll want some morality pulled in, but they have nowhere to pull it from. Let me explain it. So the question is this: if God is good, usually this can be worded in a manner of different ways. If God is perfect, if God is the definition of good, He is perfectly good. That's the definition of God. He's a perfectly good being. If God is all-knowing, He's all-powerful, and He's perfect or good, they go, then why does evil exist? Or they'll say, then why is there evil? Now, this can be evil in any sense. So some people, they'll call it naturalistic evil, which means the world is imperfect. So why do we have tornadoes? Why are there tsunamis? Why are there earthquakes? Why hurricanes? Whatever it may be. If God is so powerful and He's all-knowing, right? He's all-loving, why would He even create a world where that was possible? It's a good question. Or maybe if God is so good, why would He let people kill each other? Why is that even a thing that we can do? Or if God is so perfect, he loves all his children equally, why would he let this, adult harm an innocent child? Like they can't protect themselves. Why, if God was so good, would he really let that happen? And like those are big questions. Those are hard questions. And remember, when I talked about worldviews, there's a lot of pain normally behind those questions. But sometimes, this is a little fun exercise. Sometimes if you word a question backwards, it helps you understand more of what's going on. Because this is what they're saying. They're saying if. So it's not saying, okay, God does exist, but they're saying if God is who you say he is in the Bible, if he is perfect, he is good. That's his nature. He can't be anything other than that because that's who he is. If he is perfect and good and all-knowing and powerful, they're going, then why does evil exist? Now, at the end of the worldview talk, we said they're assuming that this exists. So if I want to reword the question, they're saying, I see evil. I see the tornadoes. I see the earthquakes. I see the murders, the mass shootings. I see whatever it may be. I see this evil, and because it exists, it disproves the existence of a God who is perfect and good. Because a perfectly good God would never allow this to happen, right? This is huge, because this is basically the crux of the morality argument. It hangs on this. So if someone goes, if your God's so great, perfect, good, whatever it may be, then why does this, whatever form of evil it is, how could he let that happen? Would he let that happen? Here's the progression of the morality argument. First it says, if you admit there's a thing as evil, which we are, right? Because we're saying, I see the evil, and then surely that evil must disprove God who's good. You go, well, you're admitting there's an evil. If you admit there's an evil, you have to admit that there's a good. Well, why do I say it this way? Because sometimes you'll hear it this way. There can't be any good without evil. But that's not true. There can be. But you can't have evil without good. Okay, here's why. Let's just go to imagination land for a second. Pretend I'm Mr. Rogers or something. Let's say you live in a foreign country, okay? In this country, there are no chairs or tables. Nowhere, ever. You've never seen a chair in your life. You eat on the floor. You go home and you relax on the floor. You go to your meetings and you guys all sit, like crisscross applesauce on the floor. And you've never seen a chair in your life. I come and visit your country. And I come in and you bring me to your house and I walk in and I look and it's just floors everywhere. No tables, no chairs. And I'm like, oh. So I ask you, do you have a chair? And you're like, what's a chair? And I'm going, oh, let me show you. So I go outside, I grab some tools, and I get some wood, some trees, and I start making a chair. I saw off 4 legs, and they're rough. It's not perfect. I don't have the best tools. And I get 4 legs and a seat and put it together. And I make kind of a makeshift, back for you to lean on. And I bring it in. It's not great. It wobbles a little, but it holds your weight. And I go, here, just sit in this. And so you come up and you're going, oh, what is this? And you sit down and you go, whoa. Like I can stretch my legs out and still be sitting. Like I can lean back and it takes all this pressure off on the muscles and you're just going, this is awesome. Because you've never seen a chair before. And is it the best chair? No, but you're going, this is super good. Like this is amazing. I love chairs. This is awesome. So you now being a new chair fanatic, I fly back to my country. You go online. I don't know why you have internet and no chairs. It's pretend, okay? So, but you go online and you're looking for chairs and you stumble across like a lazy boy. And you go, now this looks like a chair. You order it. It gets shipped to your house. They deliver it. And you sit in it and it's just, you've never had a chair with cushion. I mean, it takes you like 2 minutes just to sink all the way into it. And you're like, yes. And then you lean back and you're like, man, this thing kind of rocks, but not like the other chair, like wobbles. Like this is soothing. Like this is nice. And you see a lever on the side and you go, what's this do? And it kicks out your feet and it like leans back and you just go, oh my. Like it just blows your whole world apart. Amazing. Here's the thing. Now you look at the rickety old wooden chair that I built and you go, that's not very good compared to this thing. Here's the rub. You never knew a chair. And so when I introduced a chair, you just thought it was the best thing ever because you'd never seen another chair. You never had a standard to weigh the chair I built and say, this is bad. So it was just good, right? But when you bring in something else of higher standard, you bring in the Lazy Boy, the recliner that rocks and it has the cushion, and you compare them and you go, oh, wait a second. This chair is bad and this one's good. It's the same thing with evil and good. You can have something that's good, and if you never know anything else, it's good. Does that kind of make sense? An action can be good, but if you see another action and you can compare it and go, okay, I should not treat someone this way because this action seems bad compared to this. Yeah.
Okay, then how do you explain heaven?
In what manner?
Well, there's no evil in heaven.
Yes.
How?
Yes.
So how would, you're saying that in order for us to understand good on earth.
I'm saying in order to understand evil, you have to have good.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so you can't have evil without a good standard to compare and go, this fails the test of good. You can have good without evil, though, because you can just say, okay, this is good. Remember, like the chair, you didn't know what a bad chair was like because you never had a chair, so the chair was good. But if you have a good chair and a bad chair to compare, you can go, this one's bad, this one's good. So in heaven, I mean, I don't want to speak into heaven because I don't know, never been there yet. I'll tell you when I get there, but in heaven, I'm assuming we may remember some of this life, so we'll already know kind of bad and good. Maybe. I can't promise, but maybe. So you already know what good and bad is. I just think you have no desire to do the bad. That's my thing, but you'll probably know. But I'm not saying evil has to exist in heaven. I honestly don't believe that at all. I'm just saying if there is an evil that exists, then there's a good that exists, because you have to have a standard to call something bad. Does that make sense? Sort of, like, sort of. Let me see if I can scrounge up another example. Okay, when I was a kid, I love milk. It's a true story. I drink more milk than water. If you think that's weird, sorry. I love it. It's amazing. When I was a kid, my mom said, hey, I got this skim milk for you. And I'd never had skim milk before, so I'm like, bring it on. If it's milk, it must be good. So she gets it. I'm like kind of excited because, kids with new stuff are like, oh. And so she pours the milk and gets it. I'm like, all right. And I drink it, and it is the nastiest, tastes like old socks, like sour, gross thing I've ever had. I spit it out, and I'm like, skim milk is disgusting. I didn't drink skim milk for years. Like, I don't even know. It was years. I didn't realize until it was probably at least 5 years later. I drank skim milk not knowing it was skim milk. Drank the whole glass, just thought it was weak milk or whatever. I was like, whatever. And I think it was my aunt's like, you just drink, that's skim milk. I was like, what? No, I don't like skim milk. Skim milk's nasty. She's like, you just drank it. Come to find out, the milk my mom gave me was sour. And she had no idea, and I didn't either. So I went 5-6 years thinking skim milk what tasted like soured milk. So I was just like, how can you drink skim milk? Like, that's because in my head it was sour skim milk, and that was the taste of milk. But this is what I say. I wouldn't know what skim milk really tasted like without having the two. Do you know what I mean? So I can say, okay, this skim milk is bad and this is good when I had tasted both. But until that moment, I had no standard to judge skim milk by. It's the same thing. So if you have an evil, then you're going, this is wrong, right? We say evil is wrong. If you kill someone, we go, you should not kill someone. It's because we know what not killing someone looks like. We'd say that's the thing that you should do. Does that help alleviate some of that? Okay. So when it comes down to it, you can have good without evil, but not evil without good. Because evil is saying you failed the standard of good. And that's what the crux of the morality argument comes. So when they say, if God is good, then why does this evil exist? You're going, well, you're saying evil exists. And if you say evil exists, then you're admitting that there has to be a standard of good that evil is failing. That there's a way that someone should be living. There's an action that should be taken. There was an event that happened that should have happened differently in order for it to be good. Now here's the next progression. If you admit that there's good, then you're emitting a moral law. And this is where we kind of get the moral argument, the moral law from. There's two words I need to introduce, unfortunately, but I need to. The first one is transcendent, transcendence, whichever one, or to transcend. Transcend means to go beyond itself, essentially. Or if you want the technical term, it's to surpass conceptually, which doesn't always make as much sense, but if you want to really impress. So to surpass conceptually. Basically, transcend, if you remember last week when we were talking about God versus science, I said if the universe is this, and it's a closed system, and we have no way to break out of it, no way to go beyond, like your thoughts are just part of the system, I was talking about transcendence. To transcend means to go beyond itself, or to surpass conceptually, something to go outside of just you or outside of the system, or something maybe outside like a God, right? Speaking into the system. That's what transcend means. It means to go outside. Let's see here. The other word is relative. And I'll explain why these are important. Relative means it's dependent upon the individual.
Say that again.
It's dependent upon the individual. And I'll explain that further. So to go beyond and to be dependent upon the individual. Let me see if I hadn't thought of a good way to explain this. Maybe I should real quick before I jump into it. Let's just talk about style. I don't really have good style. My wife dresses me. True story. Every day I almost walk out and go, is this okay? Because I can't match. And she'll say yes or no or change this. A lot of times style, we'll say, is relative on the person because there isn't like a wrong or a right style, right? You know, if that's your style, you can have that. That would be relative because maybe I like to wear shorts and flip-flops and tank tops, and that's all I wear all season long, even through the winter, and you're just like, he's got weird style, but it's his. You know, it can be relative. Each person has their own way that they dress and like to dress. Now, if there was a transcendent style, it would mean there's a way that everyone should dress, which would be a uniform, right? You go to work or you go to school, and they have a code that you need to dress. And if you fail that code, it's the same for one person as the other. Now, general style, kind of, we'll just call it like weekend clothing, is relative, right? You wear whatever you want that you feel is appropriate, and that's you. It's dependent upon each person. But when you go to school, when you go to work, all of a sudden you have a transcendent style. It's a uniform because it's not just one person that does it and makes it up. Every person has to follow this certain code because it transcends the individual and goes to every person. Now, when we're talking about moral law, unfortunately, we have to define those terms because when you talk to someone who is under the persuasion of an atheistic or naturalistic worldview, they like to bring up this word relative a lot. Chances are you're going to hear it. You may hear people say all morals are relative, all ethics are relative. What they're saying is right and wrong differs depending on the person. And it sounds nice, kind of, when they explain it. Because they'll say things like, follow your heart, be true to yourself, do what you know is right. And those preach. Those make good movies. They make good songs. Like, it's kind of nice to listen to. You're like, yeah, follow your heart. And it kind of makes sense conceptually because if you've ever traveled, you know that different cultures have way different views of what is okay and what's not. I mean, we could go over there and just do something totally normal in another country, and they'll just go, wow, you are so rude. And you're going, what? I just waved like this, or I stuck out my right hand to shake it when I met you, or I didn't kiss you on the cheek when I entered the room. there's all these different places, and they're going, you know what? Right and wrong must be kind of dependent upon the person. Like each person has their own right and wrong, and that's okay. It's relative. Versus transcendent would be, you should do this, and I should do the same thing, and everyone should do the same thing because there is a moral law, there's a code that's the same for me as it is for you. Here's where they get this relative. I'm kind of running out of room, but I'll just scribble down here. Remember when we talked about atheism? Oh gosh, can't spell it again. So we have origin, which is their time plus chance plus matter. And then you have meaning. This is usually where they start positing not just there is no meaning, like the nihilism thing we talked about. This is where they actually start trying to interject meaning, and they'll say survival. And that's why I gave that example a couple weeks ago, because they'll say, well, we need to survive. That's the point of life, is to make sure that our species, our race, that humankind goes on and you survive as long as you can, because that's the way the world seems to work, right? Survival of the fittest. And so morality, they'll say there's right and wrong, but it's all relative. Now, this gets like really, really scary, like super scary. I hate thinking about it, and it's scary. They'll say it's relative because of this. If our whole goal is to survive, they'll go, man is a social primate. They're a herd animal, and so built within us, we have these instincts that evolved that say we need each other. Because a man by himself versus basically any other creature is pretty unimpressive, except for our minds. We're able to think at a higher level than any other mammal or animal that exists. And so they'll say, man needs each other, because when you put a bunch of people together, they do incredible things. They build cities, they destroy the world, whatever you want to say. They do all these really cool things together, and so we need each other. And part of that instinct is our code of right and wrong, our ethics, our morality. And they'll say it's dependent upon the person, but you have that built within you so that you can get along with other humans. Sounds okay, but here's where things break down. If this is true, and what's right for me, it may be a little bit different for you, but you follow your heart, you do what you need to do, who gets to write the laws? Are you starting to follow me? Who gets to write the laws of your city, your nation, your country? Because what if my right is a little bit different from yours? What gives you the authority to write the laws for everyone? How do we know that your right is right? Or my wrong is your wrong too?
So one of the things I always found interesting, and you're doing strictly philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
and when you started the class, you said that you can't prove the existence of God using the Bible because God existed as the Bible said so, because that's kind of a weak argument.
Mm.
But I like to, I'm bunny trailing on you a little bit, I hope
Go for it.
you forgive me. But I like to go back to the Old Testament where they had the book, Leviticus or Numbers, Deuteronomy, whatever, they had just pull up rules. But the rules were, no shellfish, no pork, the foods that you're allowed to eat, cloven hoof and all that kind of stuff. What to do if you live in a camp, you should keep your camp clean and bury that stuff. What to do in marital relations where you honor your spouse and yada, yada, yada. If you really look into those social codes, whether it's cleanliness or some of them are a little odd to us now, the Jewish unclean thing kind of eludes me a little bit. But if you look into the food, even today, pork is not the healthy meat, even without trichinosis. And the shellfish, I know everybody likes it, but it's really not a healthy meat. And if you look really deep into the sexual morality of marriage, it doesn't just affect the husband and wife, it affects the children unto however many generations, and it affects the whole community. So thousands of years ago, these rules were written, these ultimate, what do you call, transcendent rules, and they affect humanity in a mass proportion. Healthy waters, healthy relationships, healthy community. So when I look at what you've written and look at what Moses wrote, they go together.
Mm-hmm. They do. Yeah, we'll actually jump a little bit into, I'll talk about the Ten Commandments in a second.
One more thing. Why can't we just say for us, when somebody brings this to us about the relativity of it all, why can't I just say to a person, I'm guided by this book, this Bible?
You can, and that actually becomes incredibly important. And
as far, I don't have to go through, they'll tell me all what you were saying, that you can have a nice life and give you all those comforting words and what have you, but I'm doing okay using that, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm giving some suggestions to people in the audience to just say, I'm guided by this now. This works for me. You don't have to do this. And you don't even have to believe it. But I'm telling you, this is working for me. So
yeah, and we'll hit that at the end too. I think that's an incredibly, sorry, not of this lesson, but in a couple weeks. I think that's incredibly important to tell your story, and we'll hit that. This is more, if someone comes to you and says this, you can go, let's think through what you're actually saying logically, because if you take it to a spot, you're going to go, you're breaking down everything you think you're standing on. I think that's important, because if someone wants to take personal experience out of it, this is going to be what takes you to the experience again. But that's good. I mean, don't ever forget that. And if that works, I mean, I'm not telling you need to go through and check off your apologetics lesson. Be like, well, let me tell you about this and this and this and this. If you get a conversation and you get to interject and introduce them to Jesus, then by all means, do it. That's the point of this, like I said, isn't to destroy people left and right. It's to create opportunities. So chances are, though, whether it's yourself listening to something or having a conversation with someone, they may bring some of these up, and I just want to cover them fairly well so that when you get into those situations, you can go, I know something about this, let me show you this, and then open up the door to, and let me tell you what I experienced. But we'll jump back to this real quick. When someone's talking about relative morality, you lose all sense of justice, and that's terrifying. Why do I say that? Because if everything is dependent upon the individual, anybody can have a different morality. And you can't tell someone else that theirs is wrong because theirs is theirs and yours is yours, right? It's stuck with the person. This is all you have is they got theirs, and it's dependent upon the individual, and then there's this individual, and theirs is dependent. You have nothing that transcends and goes both. If everything is relative, if all we got here, all of existence as we know it came from time plus chance plus matter, and it's just this random thing, then who are you to get to say you shouldn't do this? I mean, that's just your genes telling you what's right and wrong, and maybe that some person has a different code of ethics or a different morality. And this gets scary because it sounds nice and happy to say, let's get along. Everyone's got their own morality. There's really no right and wrong to it, so can't we just forget it all? No, because who gets to write the laws then? It gets incredibly scary. And this is where naturalism fails. Because some will say, well, you can be morally good and you can be an atheist. You can be morally good and you can be a naturalist. But it ends up failing ultimately, because you can say things, well, survival of the fittest, that's the ultimate good. You'll hear words like, utilitarian, the golden rule, do the action that will cause the most good, or if you just treat others the way you want to be treated, we can all get along. It'll be great. And that way, man stays together and we flourish and survive. But without a being that transcends, that goes beyond, without someone who's outside of the system and says, this is how the universe works, and this is what right is. This is what wrong is. You can't enforce anything outside of just going, I'm bigger than you, I'm stronger than you, so do what I say. And if all there is to life, this is without God, if all there is to life is just to do, the action that's going to better the human race, that's going to help the human race survive, this thing that will do, the most good for the most people, maybe now or in the future, what's ultimately right? What happens when someone has this idea and says, no, this action will be better for the human race, and this other person is on this side going, no, this is going to be better for the human race? How do you disprove one or the other? Without having a law that says, well, this says this, so you need to adhere to it. You can't. Because they're just going, well, I feel this way. This is my moral code, and I think this is going to be the best. And they're going, well, I feel this way, and this is my moral code, and I think it's going to be the best. There's no justice. Think about this. If you know a little bit about Hitler, one of his goals was to create a Superman, and not the superhero with tights and the cape and bullets bouncing off and he's invincible except for this weird green rock. Not that. He meant a superhuman. Like, he wanted to take humanity and get the most evolved line of human beings and make sure that they went forward and became super. He wanted to help the evolution of mankind. And he was kind of motivated by the naturalistic philosophy of the age, and that was part of his goal. I'm not saying that was his end game, the whole reason, but if you read his writings, part of his dream was to create the superhuman, the most intellectual race, the most evolved race, which to him was the Aryan race, right? The blonde hair, blue eyes. Y'all are in trouble. I'm just kidding. But to him, that was the most evolved form of humans. And so he wanted to perpetuate them forward to help humanity, right, to do the most good, because in the future, we're just going to need the more evolved form of humans to be in charge because they're the smartest, they're the best. And if they're running things, then that's ultimately going to be what's the best good for humans, right, to keep our species surviving and going. But this is where it gets like really, really scary. This is why I told you relativism is super scary. What if he had never been stopped? Because we have really good arguments to say, well, he was wrong because he was killing and he was doing this and he was doing this. What if all morals are just relative? What if nobody had taken him down? What if things flip-flopped? And I know there's tons of books and movies about what if Hitler won and now we're in this weird like dystopian society. But just think about it for a second, because what philosophy, what moral code could you say you were wrong to kill all those people? If everything's relative, you wouldn't have any. You're going to have to go, there's a transcendent moral law, and you know what? It's wrong to kill. And this is why you need something that transcends, because this is what I love about the Bible. You're going to talk about Old Testament rules. We have rules like, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. You don't steal because people's possessions are valuable, because people are valuable. They have a right to some of their possessions, and to take that would be wrong. It'd be just as wrong for me as it is for you, as it is for the person next to you, as it is for the country next to us, and the whole world. Because people have a right. It would be wrong to kill someone. Thou shalt not kill. Why? Because everybody's created in the image of God, right? We all have the imago Dei, the image of God, life breathed into us. And to mar the image of God by destroying it would be horrible. Each person has value because God gave it to him, because God sits outside. He sits outside the system, right? He transcends the system. He's out here and he's going, you know what? This person has value, and this person, and this person. Everybody has value. So you can say things like, you shouldn't kill, you shouldn't steal. Don't covet your neighbor's things, they're not yours. You need to be coveting God, if I can say that. See, when you have something that transcends, it starts to make sense. When you have a moral law that isn't just relative and it goes, well, it's just dependent upon the person. When you have a moral law that actually goes beyond just the individual and hits everyone. then you can say things like, you shouldn't do that. Now here's the rub. When someone says, why is there evil, they're assuming this, not this in the law, because this is what they're saying. They're saying, I saw that action and it was wrong. But not just wrong. They're not saying it was just wrong to me. They're saying that person did that thing and they should not have done that. Anytime you point to someone else and say, you should not, they should not, that should not, you're assuming transcendence, right? Because it's going beyond you, to the other person, to the other group, to the other people. And so when you say, well, if God's so good, then how come this thing is evil? If you have evil, you're assuming that there's a good that they're failing at doing. And not just a good, you're assuming there's a moral law, a transcendent moral law that they're not living up to because you're pointing at them, right? You're saying this action, this circumstance was wrong. And not just wrong to you, not just because I feel it's wrong, but you're saying they should not kill that person, they should not steal their possessions, they should not whatever it is. And here's the other thing. If you assume that there's a transcendent moral law, then you assume that there's a moral lawgiver. And this can't be a person. Remember when I said if everything's relative, who gets to write the laws? It can't be a human that writes the laws, right? They have no ability to transcend themselves. But what if there's a God? Here's our universe, everything that we know. And here's God, and he says, this is the way I created this to work. And so then you need to do this, and this, and this. And if you fail to do it, you're failing the moral law. Because he's the one that gives the law, right? It's not a human saying, well, I think we should do this, and they get stuck inside the system. No, there's a God that's going, here's what you do, and this is why you do it. And if you assume the moral lawgiver, obviously, you're assuming God. This, in a nutshell, this little progression here is a morality argument. And I think it holds a ton of weight. Here's why. Because someone may say, I've heard him go, well, why are you so afraid of moral ethics? Isn't it okay for relative morality? Like, why does that scare you so much? I don't think everyone's going to turn into Hitlers all of a sudden and just like mass anarchy and killing. Okay, that's fair. But I'm betting at some point you are going to stop me if I come into your house and just start taking things. And you're going, hey, you can't do that. I'm going, yeah, I can. And you're going, no, you can't. I'm going, well, that's just how you feel. I think this is totally cool. This looks good. And I start walking out. Or I come into your house and I start hurting your family. And you're going, well, all morals are relative. But you're going to go, stop that. You can't do that. And I'm going, why not? Well, because I said so. Well, I think it's fine. I feel no conflict at all in hurting your family. There tends to be a line where they're going to go, you shouldn't do this. Now, on the surface level, it sounds nice. Get along, relative morality, just accept each other. But if you dig deeper, and logically you're thinking through this, they always want this at some point. They always want it to go beyond themselves at some point. And that's huge. And that in essence is the moral law. Now here's the thing. The question of, okay, why is there evil? If God is so good, why is there evil in the world? It's always brought up by a person. A person wrote that question. A person asked that question. They said it. And it's almost always, not quite, but almost always brought up about another person. So a person asked this question, and it's usually about another person. This is what it means. Personhood is intrinsically woven into that question. Intrinsically, I just mean it's so much a part of that question you can't separate it from it. It just is. Personhood is a part of the question. If I take all of my meaning out, if I take the moral lawgiver, if I take God out of the equation, say it's just time plus chance plus matter, I then remove all meaning, right? Because, think about it, if you got here, if I got here just by random explosions and a bunch of mutations and millions of years, it's the same process that the grass out there got there too. There's nothing different. It's just different molecules joined together differently. So really, there's no difference in between chopping down a person and a blade of grass, ethically, morally. But they'll want the meaning, right? They want, well, people have meaning so we can survive. Maybe grass has the same meaning, and we need to help protect the grass. No one says that. No one believes that. But that's what comes with it. And if this is asked by a person, and they want to take all meaning out of personhood and go, you're just an accident, it kind of takes all the meaning out of this question, doesn't it? And here's what I love about God. Like the person, not God, the philosophy, not God, the theology, not God, the theory of God, but like God, the actual person. And this is unique to Christianity. God, the person, gives value to you. He transcends the closed, universe as we know it. He transcends and gives you the laws of right and wrong. And he goes, you have value because I made you in my image. And he's also a person. He knows what personhood is like. So then it gives value back to this question. If you believe in God to begin with. But the weird thing about this question is that's the person who they're trying to disprove by asking the question. Crazy, right? So just by asking this question, you're going, wait, you're assuming evil, which means you assume there's a good that evil's not living up to, which assumes that there's a moral law, and it's got to be transcendent, or else it's just a free-for-all. And if there's a moral law, there's got to be a giver who transcends, right? That gives value, that gives personhood. You're assuming there's a God just to ask that question, but that's who you're trying to disprove and not prove. Now, is that really like an answer for that question? Not particularly, but it's a little bit different going, God can't exist because I see evil, and then saying, well, I kind of believe in God, but I'm having trouble with this evil thing. That's a totally different question. That's fair game. But I'm telling you, if someone comes to you on the other side and is going, there can't be a God. I've seen this, and this is bad, then you get to go, wait a second. You're cutting off the branch you're sitting on. You can't separate yourself from God and assume that people have value without a God who is a person who gives value. And that's what I love about God the person, is that we can say, don't harm that person. That person who's created in the image of my God. Don't take that person's things because they have value and they have a right to their possessions. Because man was created in the image of God. If you ever, I'm sure you've read the Constitution, but it's fun to go back and read it as a philosophical document because it actually is incredibly philosophical. What's like one of the first lines? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men were created equal. That says a lot in one sentence. That's huge. It's saying we see these things revealed in nature. It's self-evident, right? We take it that anyone can view these things and assume they're true. That every man was created equal. Here's the thing. You can't get equality from evolution, from naturalism. It doesn't exist. You can't. It's impossible. You can't say, well, I'm the same as this person. You can't. There's no meaning. There's no morality. You have no more meaning than the grass outside. So how can you say, well, we're all equal? You're not. And if survival of the fittest is the game, then whoever's the strongest and the smartest, you're not equal to them. You got to start measuring and going, well, this person's this and that. It starts breaking down. But when you go, all men were created equal, you're assuming, man, there's someone who's giving every person their equality, right? And here's the rub. I mean, all of Western modern democracy kind of hangs on that, right? You get to vote because you have equal say in the government. And I'm not arguing like America's a total Christian nation, but I'm just saying you want to get rid of the God and the moral lawgiver, you got to throw out democracy in any form. And people don't want to do that. We want equality. We want, everyone to get along and have meaning, but we just don't want this guy because that's not very comfortable, right? But it's really comfortable to say, everyone's relative, so just deal with it and have fun. But if you push back on it, there's a line. If you're assuming evil, you assume good. If you assume good, you assume a moral law. If you assume there's a moral law, then there has to be a moral lawgiver. That's God. I'll read you this. This is an outtake from Ravi Zacharias. I actually wasn't going to do this till later, but I'll do it now. This is in his book, The End of Reason, which is on the resources books, I think. Yeah, it is. It's on the resources books. He talks a lot. This is one of the reasons I love Ravi Zacharias, too. He talks a lot about the morality argument. Also, C.S. Lewis does. If you read Mere Christianity, he talks about that in depth pretty well. Does a great job explaining that if you ever want to read up more. But let me read you an excerpt. This is from Ravi Zacharias. It's actually a really fun story. He says, let me narrate an interaction I had with a student at the University of Nottingham in England. As soon as I finished one of my lectures, he shot up from his seat and he blurted out rather angrily, "There is so much evil in the world. Therefore, there cannot be a God." I asked him to remain standing and answer a few questions for me. I said, "If there's no such thing as evil, aren't you assuming there's a thing as good?" He paused and he reflected and said, "I guess so." "If there's such a thing as good," I countered, "you must affirm a moral law on the basis of which to differentiate between good and evil." I reminded him of this debate between the philosopher Frederick Copleston and the atheist Bertrand Russell. And at one point in the debate, Copleston said, "Mr. Russell, do you believe in good and bad? Don't you?" Russell answered, "Yes, I do." "Well, how do you differentiate between them?" challenged Copleston. Russell, he shrugged his shoulders as he was wont to do in a philosophical dead end, and he said, "Well, the same way I differentiate between yellow and blue." Copleston, he graciously responded and said, "But, Mr. Russell, you differentiate between yellow and blue by seeing, don't you? How do you differentiate between good and bad?" And Russell, with all of his genius still in reach, gave the most vapid answer he could have given. "Well, on the basis of feeling, what else?" I must confess, Mr. Copleston, he was a kinder gentleman than many others, because the appropriate logical kill for the moment would have been, "Mr. Russell, in some cultures they love their neighbors, and in others they eat them, both on the basis of feeling. Do you have a preference?" So I returned to my question to my student. It's my favorite line ever. That's why I read it. So I returned to my questioning student in Nottingham. "When you say there's evil, aren't you admitting there's a good? And when you accept the existence of goodness, you must affirm a moral law on the basis of which to differentiate between good and evil. But when admitting to a moral law, you must posit a moral lawgiver, and that, however, is who you're trying to disprove and not to prove, for there is no moral lawgiver, then there is no moral law. And if there's no moral law, there is no good, and if there's no good, there's no evil. What then is your question?" There's this conspicuous pause that was broken when he said rather sheepishly, "What then am I asking you?" And said, "That's the rub, I might add." I love that excerpt because it goes through all that really quickly, but it illustrates it rather well, doesn't it, when he goes, if all you differentiate, if all morality is relative, and you just feel the difference. Do you hear that line where he's like, in some cultures they love their neighbors and others they eat them, all based on feeling. So which one do you prefer? It all breaks down at the end of the day, unless you have something that transcends, that goes outside the system, that speaks into the system. And that's where you get God. Now, the one caveat is this question is different if it's asked by someone who's going, okay, I believe in God, but I'm really having a hard time with why he would let this exist. That is a really good question. But I said for the majority of this class, we're going to be talking about someone coming from a naturalistic or an unbelieving point of view. And 9.9 times out of 10, I found that that's not asked by someone who thinks there is a God. It's usually being asked by someone who has a problem with God. And they're going, surely he can't exist, right? Because of this. Now, someone asked a question, I think it was 2 weeks ago, about free will, and that's more of my answer to why there's evil. And this is like a total tangent, and it's not, I didn't write it down, but I'll show you real quick. If someone does ask this question and they're going, okay, I believe in God, why is there evil? There's a couple of answers. I'm just going to tell you mine, and it's all based on free will, essentially. Because we talked about if God created this system, and he created everyone, and they could do no evil, like you just had no choice, right? Then you become robots, essentially. And that's not much better than going, well, we just got here by time plus chance plus matter, because then your brains have no way to transcend, and you're essentially robots just dancing to your DNA. Same thing, if God just made you and you have no choice in any matter, then you're just robots dancing to God's puppet strings, right? Side note, we are going to talk about some theology things, so if anyone's a Calvinist, don't rip me. I'm okay with it. I'm just saying this is my personal view. So that's it. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. If each person has no way to break outside of God's will, right? This is God's will now because he created it. If you have no way out, no choice in the matter, is that really love? I'd say no. If you tell someone they have to do something and they have no choice and you force their action and then you go, look how much they love me, no one would really say that. No one would really say that. Look how much they love me. I'm literally making them do this. I think it's the same way with God. I think he goes, I want you to choose me. That seems a lot more like love, right? I'll put this tree here, but I still want you to choose me. I asked you not to eat of it. You have the option to not choose me, but I want you to continue to choose me every day. Choose me. That sounds a lot more like love, right? Maybe if you have a way out and go, I don't really choose you, he's going to go, I will build that in so that you can come back and choose me. Because that's love, is it not? That's how I view it. So if someone's going, well, why is there evil? We're going, because people have a choice. Because I think the God that I know is a God of love. And he built love into the system so that you could choose him. And there's a lot of people who take this route and they don't choose him. And there's times when I don't choose him and I should. And so this creates a lot of this. And you're looking at it, but at the end of the day, if God's still God, it kind of changes things. It kind of changes that question a little bit. So that's my quick answer. I know there could be a ton of debate there. I'll stay away from it just for our sake. But that's the morality argument. It's really, if morals exist, God exists. Because you can't have morals without a transcendent moral law. You can't have a moral law without a moral lawgiver, and that's God. So I went a little long, but if you guys have any questions about that, we'll take them for a little bit, and then if not, we'll go on our merry way. Any questions?